Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. It's time for Mealworms and More. We are going to wait our normal 3 to 4 minutes. Get started at about 4 after, so 2:34 Central Time. As folks start joining, if somebody could do the obligatory audio and video check to make sure that I am able to be heard and seen. Rodney, hello, sir. Glad to have you. Some fun things coming up for email subscribers. I'm excited about that. Mike, thank you. Matthew, thank you. Glad you guys are here. A lot going on. Upward swing, though. Good news for today. And good news for the co-op, too. We'll get into that. Keith. Good afternoon. We are waiting for folks to join. Bryce, welcome. It is going well. Today is a much better day than the last couple weeks. The farm is open as well, so Ben and I were in there earlier today harvesting, but I've had the exhaust fan running for the last 45 minutes, I think, so particles should be down thanks to the Inkbird sensor. Info coming on that soon. Tara, hello. Rodney, got your pain meds ready to go. Need those after the hospital, right? After the visits. I was really hoping to go be able to order some trays today. I'm waiting on the shipping quote from Alexis up at Tricycle. I think it'll be the third or fourth order now, so I don't know if anybody else has ordered from them yet. Had a good or positive experience, but I'm going to be ordering again, so good stuff. Bryce, how did it go with the cold weather? Cold weather was okay. Well, let's look at what time it is. We'll get into the shipping stuff here because that was quite a big ordeal and honestly one of the reasons that I haven't been around. So hopefully that is resolved. We'll get into that, the cold weather stuff and the shipping issues here in a couple minutes. But if you guys want to get into the farm, if you have any questions about stuff you've seen posted, or anything you want to see in the farm, it is fair game and open. We can walk in there and look at that. And I've got a couple updates on the shipping stuff, some interesting information or like lessons learned, I guess, on or during that whole experience that I can also walk through as well, both from a raising the mealworms perspective and like a business / shipping perspective. Matthew, got a question. Can you grind wheat straw for bedding and or wheat seed? Thanks. Wheat straw, I'm not sure about. I actually, I started using wheat mids probably about a month and a half ago, in conjunction with wheat bran. So I have not totally gotten rid of the wheat bran. I'm trying to follow my own advice and not just do something without validating and testing and making sure it doesn't negatively impact things. So I'm using the wheat mids. It's a more finer. It is a finer material that has more of a powdery consistency, particulate in it, along with larger pieces. And what I've found is that it also has straw in it. And the straw is not going away. The beetles aren't eating it. The mealworms are not eating it. So what we're finding is as we sift it, we're seeing all these little tiny pieces, not super tiny. I mean, they're big enough to pull out and grab pieces of straw, and they're just not eating it. And if I remember correctly, there were times in the past where I've done like food waste stuff with the mealworms, and there are things that they just don't consume well. Maybe it's the really starchy stuff. That I'm not 100% sure on, but I'm not sure if the wheat, even grinding it, right? Like the wheat or the straw that I'm finding, it's not hard or dense. It's not impossible for them to get a mouth on and eat. I think they're purposely choosing not to eat it. And my theory with the wheat straw is even if you grind it up and make it smaller, it's not going to change whether they eat it or not. So you could try just putting that wheat straw into a bin of larger mealworms and see if it disappears, right? Like weigh it out, get 10 grams of it or something and put it into a tray, and then see if it starts to disappear. If it doesn't, you could also, again, test a small batch of that just to see how that plays out, Matthew, of are they actually going to eat it? I would be worried that it gets ground up and they don't consume it, and it just goes into the frass that gets sifted out, especially if you're going to grind it and make it a real small particulate. Wheat seed, I honestly have no idea. I doubt that any of that is in the wheat mids. I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to check on that real quick. Levels of fiber, protein, minerals, I don't. It's not flour, good source of blah, blah, blah. ... Gotta click. Run through the mill with the kernel removed for flour before they separate bran and some flour out. Okay, there we go. Perfect. Thank you, sir. Wally, welcome. Well, we're way past the 3 to 4 minute mark, so we got caught up in questions. Let's go ahead and reset. Here we go. Wheat seed is the complete product before dehulled. So if that gets ground up, then that would be similar to wheat mids from a consumption perspective, right? Anyway. All right, so a little delayed start. Welcome to Mealworms and More. It is February 15th. We have not gotten together for a few weeks, and a couple of reasons for that we can get into. But we're here today to walk through all things mealworms related. So if you guys have any questions, any issues, anything you're running into, any problems, or any successes, we like to see those too, celebrate those, and help others learn from those. So if you've got those, definitely share those out. Don't be bashful here. We'll give a round of applause and lots of thumbs up and high fives and hearts and whatnot. And so we want to walk through that. So start throwing those questions out. If I seemingly ignore your question or comment, please tag me or somebody reply to it and tag me. Sometimes Facebook doesn't show all of those questions, comments, etc. And then if there's anything afterwards that we don't have time to get to, we do have a schedule stop today at 3:30 Central, so roughly 51 minutes from now. I can go a little bit over, but do need to head out fairly quickly after that. But if there's anything that gets thrown out that isn't addressed or touched on after this post to the group, so this will be recorded. Facebook does that automatically, and we'll post it to the group so that folks that couldn't join can run through and see this. And then we will also take this and put this on YouTube so that folks there who don't have Facebook have a way to see some of this really awesome information. So as you guys have questions, comments, successes, things like that, start throwing them in the comments here and we'll tackle them. And again, if there's anything you want to see in the farm, so the insect room is available. It's been exhausted. It's still exhausting now. I should probably go turn that off. And particulates should be down, and everything should be good to go at this point if we need to get in there and see something. So let's take a look here. Felicia is here. Good to see you, Felicia. I'm just now seeing that. Maybe they get delayed and then they show up. Anyway, so Bryce, you had a question about how did it go with the cold weather. So for those of you that may not have seen in the last couple of weeks, unknowingly to me, we had some really bad weather that impacted USPS pretty significantly. So not this week or the last week, but the week before, when I shipped out on Monday, what I discovered on Wednesday evening, unfortunately, was that because of some ice and bad weather around the country, USPS in Kansas City and Indianapolis, 2 major hubs, were refusing live animals, including live insects. And so all of my orders, 96% of them or something like that, something ridiculously high. I think like 2 or 3 people actually got their orders. But just about all of them ended up coming back to the Ashland post office on Wednesday, and then they were shipped back. Nobody asked or called or said, hey, what do you want to do with this? They just shipped it back and said, okay, send it again. Similar problem. They rejected it, and they came back, and Friday of that week I retrieved them. So with all the cold weather, I think it was the ice that did it. I heard from some people down south that it was just things were closed, like bad weather, not worth it. And at the end of the day, I was frustrated, and so was everybody that had ordered. But I think it was the right thing to do from a safety perspective, and I think USPS and the FedEx folks were keeping things alive as best they could. So rather than letting them sit there and potentially freeze, die, etc., they weren't sure how long those things can last in there, so they shipped them back. So kudos to the post office here. The only thing I wish I had seen a little sooner was that they were not going to make it. So have those conversations, and hopefully we can avoid that in the future. But a couple of really good things to learn out of that. One, humans are amazing people. I sent an email out to everyone affected, and the support and feedback from folks was great. So if you guys are raising mealworms and wanting to sell them, whether you're selling locally, whether you're shipping them, whatever it is you're doing, be open with your customer, because it was scary to type that email up, and just I was expecting frustration and not positive things, and people were very, very, very awesome. Worked with me on reshipping or getting a refund. A lot of folks were worried about me. That was one of the videos I posted that really shocked me, was folks being feeling bad for me. And then I realized nobody had seen the update or knew that those insects were okay. So one of the great things about mealworms and mealworm beetles is they're very hardy. So Friday, when I picked those mealworms and beetles up, I brought them back to the farm and spent 3.5 hours unpacking everyone's order. So I also got to see what customers do whenever they unpack, and have a couple ideas on how to improve that, which is interesting. But everything survived. So they went from Ashland to Kansas City and back twice. And then on Friday, I picked them up, brought them back here, and everything was alive. So from a inventory and financial perspective, I was okay. People were assuming I had lost all of that, and that's just, if it dies, I replace it. And so that they were very worried about me, which was great to see. But everything turned out okay outside of the delays, obviously. The following week, things were able to be shipped out. The cold weather restriction was lifted for live animals, including the insects, and away they went. So it was a lot of frustration of having to deal with that, but lots of good came out of that. And at this point, I think we are recovered from a backlog perspective. So that, the weather, along with, Julie, I see that question. I'll get off my soapbox here in a minute and tackle that. So along with the shipping delay, the sifter broke as well. So the new horizontal sifter. And so the volume of things we had to get done started to bulk up, and I wasn't able to step in and harvest and help out with that. And so we got behind. And so last week was a big recovery week to try to get things under control, because if you start having your mealworms pupate and then hatch in those trays into beetles, the frass is going to be contaminated with eggs at that point. We don't separate eggs from frass here, so we rely on making sure we get the frass out of there before the beetles have a chance to lay eggs in it. And so we started to get behind there, so then that impacts the frass supply. We also had way more stuff starting to pupate and turn into beetles. So the benefit there is that that's more freshly hatched beetles for folks to grab from an inventory perspective. So not anything too terrible, just work. So that's where I've been the last couple of weeks, is trying to catch up on that. And then this past Saturday, a really good friend of mine runs a machine shop and has a welder and can weld anything. So I took the machine to him. Turns out there's a couple of defects in the machine I bought that it was bound to happen at some point. And so the benefit to that is, the goal of this whole insect farm right now is to get it squared away from a production perspective, max out the number of trays, the machines, right? The automations that we have where the water goes into the tank, if anybody saw that. Get things streamlined to where, I very, very much believe that a lone individual can operate an 1,100 square foot mealworm farm and pump out 2 million mealworms a month easily. So I am hell-bent on proving that out. And so I spent Saturday to get that thing fixed with a friend, and then I ran 100 trays through it today. So what we learned from that in fixing it, we can now apply to either finding a machine that does that or blueprinting that out ourselves and seeing what we need to do to get that made. So a lot of good learning experience there, although they've been extremely painful from a time availability perspective. And so that is an extremely long story about the weather and how we're caught up now. And also a lot of thanks to you guys for being patient on having another one of these. We haven't had any in a couple weeks. So fingers crossed we're back on a good path, and away we go. All right. Julie. I would like to know how you got started selling. How did you get the word out that you were selling? Awesome question, Julie. So originally I started raising these things for chickens we had at the time. So that was 2015. And then the mealworm colony got out of control. Just larvae everywhere, right? Which is a good problem to have, except I didn't have an outlet for them. So I was finding people that had chickens that would, here, take them because they're going to go to waste. And did some more research, and, things happened, and I decided to make a business out of it and just take a stab at it as a side thing. So in 2017, I established the LLC, and at that point started, selling. And what I did at the time was I started, I would go into Facebook groups, I would join them, I would search for terms like mealworms, feeder insects, things like that, and see what people were either asking about, posting about, that sort of thing. I don't think at the time you could go in and sell live animals on Facebook. I can't remember. You can't do that now. So you can't go into a group and post and say live insects available for sale. That'll get banned, removed, etc. Even in like swap shops and things like that. So what I did is I went in and just tried to understand what folks were asking for, needing, etc., and then mention, hey, I raise mealworms for my chickens. Would you like some? And so it was, very informal. And I was upfront with folks, whenever I would try to, whenever I would get someone interested and start talking to them, I'd say, I have no idea how to use these with reptiles. And so I had a couple of folks that were brand new to geckos at the time who reached out and said, how many mealworms do I feed my gecko? When do I stop? What do I do? What kind of dish do I need? And I had to just say, I have no idea. I'm raising these for chickens and I have extra ones. I honestly have no idea what you would need there. I didn't have a Wally at the time. And so it was a lot of Facebook groups, Craigslist, which is I still get hits off Craigslist. Post there, it's free. The only thing you need to remember is that set a reminder of when that thing's going to expire and go back in and reset it. I still have people that reach out to me from Craigslist. And then I tried doing a little bit of Facebook advertising, but I was terrible at it. I'm not a salesman, and I didn't invest the time needed to learn how to do that well. And I didn't want to pay somebody else to do it. It didn't have the revenue at the time. So I just started kind of word of mouth around what was local and near to me. Then I started talking to the feed store that I buy feed at. So I had a relationship with them. I had no idea what I was doing at the time. So I said, hey, I've got mealworms. Do you guys want to sell those here? And they were very receptive. We talked through the different options. And I said, I've never done this before. So if I recommend something or you need something that I don't bring up, please let me know. And so we got in a rhythm with that. I think being open and honest with folks as you get started is going to be helpful for you because it gives them some context around where you're at, right? And then I saw a local news story about a bird store in Jefferson City, and I thought, hey, people need mealworms that they feed to birds. So I went in and introduced myself, and I've been selling to that guy for 4 or 5 years now. So it was really just a grassroots organic kind of thing. I still to this day don't do advertising. I don't do marketing. I've gone to a couple shows, like trade shows, things like that. Those have been very, very good to better understand the customer and what they need. But a lot of it has just been organic. I do a lot of social media. So things like this, that draws folks in. I don't purposely come here to sell, but it's a good way for folks to learn about it, learn about me, learn about us. And then YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. What I would say about that aspect of it is don't purposely just go to those locations and sell. Every post should not be, hey, I've got mealworms for sale, come buy them. Nobody wants to be sold to, right? You're on social media flipping past those ads as quick as you can, right? And so I don't post that kind of stuff all the time. I'm posting things about how to raise your own, how to do stuff, and then things like this. So I think it's word of mouth, and it takes a while. It's organic, right? So it's not going to just boom overnight. But I think that's a good thing because from a mealworm growing perspective, you want to go slow in the beginning because your colony is still expanding. And if you sell too much of that accidentally, you're going to hurt yourself because you're going to have to harvest more of that, right? You're going to have to pull from that stock, and then that's going to hurt you longer term. So it's nice to go that route. I feel like raising mealworms and starting that business go well together because it's nice and slow. So if you have any other questions about that, Julie, throw them in here and let me know, and I'll clarify what I can. Let's see. Do you first remove shaver? Okay, so that's about the thing. Do you have to separate or can you leave it all together? That's about the no sales ready for lift off. Got a quick question. Shoot them over if you cannot answer. Yes, sir. Yeah, I've got you on bookmarked, so it's just a matter of getting those questions. Chaff is like straw. Okay, Bryce and who's that? Michael or Matthew chatting about the wheat stuff. Julie, that's a lot of great information. Have you ever considered doing farmers markets? Yes. So prior to the other dynamic, just to give some context around what I'm doing, I didn't start doing this full time until November of 2021. So a little over a year and 4 months now, almost a year and a half. And so before that, I think farmers markets are prime locations for local folks to learn about what's available from an insect perspective, in this case, mealworms. And you can go to a farmer's market and get a premium price in most cases, and beat any price that somebody's going to find online. And people that go to farmers markets are wanting to support local people. It's a fantastic place to do that. I personally have not done that for a couple of reasons. One, prior to 2021, the end of 2021, I was working a full-time gig in corporate America, 50 hours a week, traveling, etc. And weekends were precious time that I was not willing to give up in order to go sell at the farmer's market. The big market here is on Saturday, and I just did not want to do that. Didn't want to give that up. And then the local market here in my small town of Ashland was on Wednesdays or Thursdays. I couldn't consistently go because of the travel that I did for work at the time. But I think that those are great locations. In the last few months, I've been looking at the requirements to go to the farmer's market, thinking about it quite a bit. Honestly, I don't have the push to do it yet because I'm having problems keeping inventory in stock. I'm selling the stock that I have. And so I've run into that problem recently where I need to kind of hold back some to make sure that I can handle the random one-off orders for somebody that comes in that that I haven't seen in a while, etc. But I haven't had the need to go to the farmer's market and spend the time there in order to get the product sold. But I think those are fantastic places. If you have not gone to one, go see what's there, and then start talking to the folks that run the market. Live animals sometimes are not allowed at farmers markets. And technically insects fall into that category. But if you talk to those folks, and I've already had some of those conversations with the folks at the farmers market in Columbia, and they're open and receptive to it if I wanted to do it. So it just took some time to kind of explain, I'm not going to be throwing mealworms everywhere. They're going to be contained. They don't fly. It's not going to cause a huge problem. They just need a little bit of education because it's a new thing. And it's highly likely that where you're at, nobody is selling mealworms at the market. The other benefit is take your frass, because you could sell your live mealworms for the folks that want to do the feeding to the birds. But frass will also be popular because the folks that go to the farmers market more than likely also have a high percentage of gardens, indoor plants, things like that. So a really good place to sell the frass as well. All right. Awesome questions, Julie. Let me scroll. So we were just talking about considering farmers markets. Michelle, hey, welcome. No worries that you're late. All good. You're here. Tonkli, do you have in U.S. some regulation about selling frass? Yes. So if you, and for all the folks that have questions below that, right now I'm on Tonkli, and the question about selling frass, if I haven't gotten to your question below, we're getting there. Lots of good stuff today. So regulation about selling frass. If a person or a corporation, company, whoever decides to sell frass in the U.S. as a fertilizer, then there are very specific and strict regulations around selling fertilizer, and for a lot of good reasons. For example, when I looked into this, I sell my frass as a soil amendment. So I don't guarantee the analysis on it. I don't test it routinely. I don't label it with the NPK, those values. There are some very specific things that if you do that or make claims about your product that are underneath the fertilizer rules, then you have to abide by the fertilizer requirements, both federally, state, and if you have any local laws as well. And when I looked into that, it's probably been 5 years ago or something. I talked to the Missouri Fertilizer Board. I'm located in Missouri. And there's fees that have to be paid per ton of frass produced. You also have to analyze it all the time to guarantee your analysis within a very small threshold. If you're going to claim it has certain values or certain things, then there is labeling requirements around sizes of the values of things or what's contained within it. Very particular things that you need to abide by, and they all have good intent behind them. So hopefully I'm not coming across as negative of those. I think it's good for folks to be aware of what it is that they are purchasing, and that's why the label information and those requirements are in place. At that point, once I researched the Missouri laws and talked to the Missouri board, I decided I didn't want to move forward with a fertilizer, and I have not pursued it since. My goal and my aim has been focused on the live mealworms, producing them, raising them, doing that as efficiently as possible. The frass, honestly, right now is sort of a byproduct. When it sells, it sells. I did not build the model here in this farm from a financial perspective to be dependent on the frass sales. It's an added benefit and it helps, but it's not mandatory in order for things to function here. So at some point, and that reason there, Tonkli, of the regulations, along with in the U.S. In general, this is a very broad stroke here. In general, Americans are not aware of frass, what it does, how it's beneficial, and they're not inclined to purchase it. What we're competing against from a sales perspective is that there are products on the market, good, bad, or otherwise, and we don't need to get into all that, but there are products on the market that when you apply them to your plant, you can see results very quickly. And you can see results on plants that you put it on and plants that you don't. There is a visual difference. right? You're either going to have a taller plant or more blooms or et cetera, et cetera. And so there is a very visual aspect to that that consumers see and now expect. With frass, what you're doing with that plant is you are making it healthier, stronger, more adapted to the environment, and the visual impact of that is not as robust as some of the other things that are available. And so if you can't see it, folks are in general going to be very leery of that. And when it comes to taking money out of their pocket and paying you for that product versus the one that they can see that, even if, good, bad, or otherwise, it's a chemical versus something that's natural. But I think long term, we are starting to see more interest in it. There are a couple places in the U.S. that are purposely trying to educate the U.S. about what frass is, because they're producing a lot of it. And so they want to be able to sell that and market it to folks and benefit from that financially, which is fine. That's what a business does. And so they're trying to educate people. It's just going to take a while. So because of those two reasons, I just have not really pushed the frass. And when it goes, it goes. So, all right. Really good question, Tonkli. Hopefully I'm saying your name correctly. If I'm not, please let me know the appropriate way to say that. Oh, sorry. Marianne. So we've got lots of comments underneath. Marianne's here. I'm going to read this and keep rolling. I'm very new, so you separate your pupa from the worms. Yes. So, Marianne, there are 4 stages. Why did I hesitate? I should know that. There are 4 stages. So we've got an egg, right? And then the egg hatches and becomes a larva, which is the worm form. It's going to be real, real tiny when it first hatches, microscopic. You're not going to be able to see it visually with your eye. And then it's going to grow, and go through what are called instars, I-N-S-T-A-R. Basically, it's going to molt, get bigger, and then do that a bunch of times. And then, so that's the larva stage, the worm stage. Those are the things that most people want to purchase and buy or utilize to feed all of their critters. Then, once it gets to a certain size, usually a larger one unless it's been stressed or there's problems, once it gets big enough, it will transition into a pupa. The pupa doesn't actively eat. It doesn't actively move. It's basically just a still thing. And so what the larva will do, the worm form, they are actively seeking out things to eat, consume, to help them grow. And if they can't find anything, they will go after the pupa, because the pupa is nice and squishy on the inside and pretty yummy to a starving larva. And so what a very common practice is for folks to do is to separate those pupa out, put them off in their own container, so that they can transition into the fourth stage, which is a beetle, and not have to worry about cannibalism from the larva eating the pupa. So that's why folks do that generally. There are a couple scenarios where you don't have to do that. One, if you've got a very small colony and you're feeding, a reptile or two, there's nothing wrong with having all of those stages together in a single container. You will have cannibalism. You'll have a scenario where they will eat each other. Beetles will eat some of the eggs. The larvae are going to eat some eggs and some pupa. It's going to happen. But you're going to still produce enough to be able to feed those 1 or 2 reptiles. Once you start getting above that, it makes more sense to separate those stages out. And then you're going to need a few different containers. So hopefully that helped Marianne continue to ask questions and we'll definitely be here to help, both here and in the co-op group. So anybody is asking questions here, please feel free to ask them in the group as well. Lots of good folks out there to answer questions and help everybody out. All right, leave it all there to clean out the final cleanup. I would definitely take the chaff out, blow it. It's very light. Bryce and Matthew are having a very in-depth conversation on the straw that I'm going to need to take a look at later. Wally, I've crossed the line and started adding water crystals to the mealworms, and the worms look good so far. Still cannot convince myself yet to mist, but crystals are a big step for me. Awesome. So the crystals are a good transition too, right? So what you want to keep in mind, Wally, is don't overfeed, right? So if you keep putting more and more crystals in, it's not going to make them go away faster. It's just going to keep building up. So kudos to you for trying something new, though. Way to go. Uh-oh. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, so I am down to Steve. Hey, Steve, good to see you. Is it normal for most of your mealies to pupate and become beetles long before eggs hatching? It looks like my mealworms will all be beetles before I have baby mealworms. Yes. So if you haven't staggered those, then the larvae that you have that are larger are going to start pupating. They're going to then transition into the beetle. And what you'll have is kind of a gap there where your beetles are going to start laying and you're going to start having hatchlings, little tiny baby micro mealworms, but your larvae are going to start transitioning. So you can do a couple things. You can supplement your beetles or supplement your larvae. Sorry, get larvae again, or you can take some of your larvae and cold storage them. So that will slow them down from pupating. It's not a good idea generally to refrigerate or cold storage your pupa. That will dry them out and die. They'll die, sorry. But if you can take your larvae and just cold storage them, just a certain amount of them, not all of them, just some of them, cold storage them to slow them down from pupating, you can start to close that gap or make it a little smaller, and that way you'll continue to produce pupa. Like take them out after a week or two, warm them back up, get them going again, and then they'll start transitioning, right? So that way you can kind of deal with that gap as your micro mealworms from your earliest beetles start hatching and growing. That's a very, very common thing. You're not doing anything wrong. That's a totally normal thing to walk through. Sorry, I was noticing some ins and outs of the darkness on the phone. I don't know if that's coming through here or not, but Tunkley, we have some regulation aligning the standards for placing on the market of frass with those applying the processed animal manure. Oh, that's interesting. Frass treated at 70 degrees Celsius for 1 hour. That sounds about right, par for the course. So what the industry is very used to dealing with right now from a fertilizer perspective is things like manure that are wet and carry pathogens. Mealworm frass in general, again, very broad stroke, mealworm frass in general does not carry those pathogens that are known to be very detrimental to humans, right? And so you can handle mealworm frass in a different way compared to the way you would handle fresh cow manure, right? And so unfortunately, the regulations, as far as I understand it, in a lot of places, they are treating insect frass in a very similar way as unprocessed cow manure. And in order to make sure, again, the intent is to ensure that we're not hurting other humans, right? It's good intent. And so the regulations around heat treating it, dealing with that and making sure that there are not pathogens and getting to a certain temperature point, which I think you mentioned here, the 70 degrees for 1 hour to kill off whatever's in there. So I think what I would say is that in time, folks will learn that that's not absolutely necessary through more research, more studies, more usage, things like that, and that ideally it becomes a scenario where those regulations can be modified for insect frass. But yes, I can't remember. There was also something with the larva. I can't remember what that was, but what you're experiencing, Tunkley, is it makes sense, right? Because folks are used to, they're applying what they know about manure historically and with experience based out of animal manure, mammal manure, not insects. I'm thinking of food versus feed. So at some point I looked into what the regulations would require me to do if I were to raise mealworms for human consumption. This was 3 or 4 years ago. And what I found is that people had no idea. When I talked to them, they were like, you want to do what with bugs? And so what they decided was that they went with the most strict regulation they could find in every category because they just didn't know, right? Their intent and their purpose is to make sure that what I'm doing is not going to hurt people. And because there were a lot of unknowns, they said, well, the most strict thing that we know will not cause problems is XYZ. And so it just became a very, very big impediment to try to get into that. And I haven't looked into it since then for a couple of reasons. One, U.S. folks aren't really keen on eating insects. A lot of conspiracy theories going on around that now. And two, I don't have an inventory issue. I don't have a need to try to find an outlet for more sales because the stuff we have here is selling. So at some point that might change. Julie, thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for coming by. What time are we at? Oh my gosh, 3:10. Okay, we've got 20 minutes, and I can go a little bit over. So, all right. So I just saw Julie's comment. Now I've got Tara's question. So if you've got more stuff below there, be patient with me. We're getting there. I'm interested in raising mealworms for my chickens. I'm slowly gathering equipment to start. Sorry if this is a ridiculous question, but when I hear bran, I have to hit see more. When I hear bran, my mind goes to box cereal. That's okay. Where do I find the brand for feed and bedding, and exactly what do I search for? I search brand at TSC and find horse feed products. I'm very new to all this. Awesome. Thank you for coming here, and thank you for asking the question. You were in the right place. I don't know if anybody has already answered this below. I have a couple suggestions. So when you think of brand, you can get brand at human stores, grocery stores that sell food for us. That is an option. It'll be in like usually it's the stores that have like the fill your own or grab your own things that you open up and weigh out. You'll see brand there. But from a bulk perspective, so in order to raise mealworms for chickens, you're going to need not a ton of mealworms, but it makes more sense for you to get brand from a feed store like Tractor Supply or something equivalent. And so what those stores will do is they don't usually carry those products in general because there's not a high demand for them. So there's no purpose for them to stock those on the shelves or to have them available on the website for you to say, yeah, I want that one, I'll go pick it up. What I would suggest is that you need to call those locations and say, hey, I need 50 pounds, 40 or 50 pounds of wheat bran. Do you guys sell bags of those? Can you order some of those in? And they'll be happy to do that. They get deliveries routinely, and they'll tell you, yep, it'll be here in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever their delivery schedule is. It may be a brand new thing for them, right? So if nobody's had to do that for them before or asked that question at that particular Tractor Supply, they might not know, and they'll have to do some research and find out. But the other thing to do, I would search around you for feed stores, feed supply stores, things like that. And again, it's going to be a quick phone call or a stop by to them to say, like, can you order this if you don't have it? But my wheat bran comes in 50-pound bags. Actually, let's go take a look at that. And the brand of it that I use is Seamer. I can never remember how to say it. So, manufactured Seamer Milling out in Illinois. So these bags, right, I'm getting hundreds of pounds at a time. But just let the store know what quantity you want, and then they'll order that in for you. But yes, that's an awesome question. Don't be bashful about asking more questions. Woo! My holder disappeared, and so we're just tentatively hanging on to gravity, keeping my phone where it needs to be. Matthew, do I need to buy different mealworms and beetles to add to the ones I have? Thanks. Ooh, that's going to be a hotly contested question. Did anybody answer that one yet? Or did I get the jump on it? Too much scrolling, I can't tell. If you go to the co-op group and search for the term genetics or genetic, I think that might get you some of the posts that have had this question before. So there are a couple schools of thought. One is the concept around just in nature that if you get a gene pool that is too specific and inbred, it doesn't produce positive end results in the long run. And then there's the other perspective of that where like I personally ran for several years without any introduction of outside insects into my farm, and I didn't notice any sort of degradation, any sort of mutation problem, any sort of loss in production. any sort of like visible or documentable from like a volume sales perspective. Like I didn't notice all of a sudden, oh, I don't have any mealworms left to sell. What's going on? Nothing was producing. That being said, I wasn't running a laboratory type scenario where I was very diligently, weighing everything, sizing everything, etc. There have been a couple studies released around, selective genetics, where folks will pick, like the biggest beetles and just have those to go off and reproduce and see what happens. I personally think having a varied size, varied selection is just fine. I use all the beetles that I have, whether they're big or small, and I have not noticed any sort of degradation in the production in the farm. That being said, there's the potential that my production could be better if I introduced new genetics. I haven't had the issue yet in the farm to push me to spend the time to really try to dig into that and see if it's worth it or not. I think, there's probably nothing wrong with doing it. I don't think there's anything wrong with getting mealworms from various folks across the U.S. What I would encourage you to be mindful of is when you receive those mealworms and beetles, keep them separated, segregated from your current colony for at least 2 to 3 weeks. Make sure that you're not bringing in any freeloaders. So cleaner crew eggs are the other thing to be mindful of, or very small cleaner crew that just have not grown big enough to be visually seen with the naked eye. But there's nothing wrong with getting other genetics. You're not going to cause any problems from a production perspective. It's not like they won't mate with each other or something like that. But that what I would be mindful of is bringing in other things, whether those are very low probability that there's any sort of disease scenario. Superworms, I think, are the only ones real prevalent with densovirus. Mealworms have not had those issues, and so that's the other thing that you don't need to really be concerned about. But again, I would keep them separate. Just make sure that you clean out any stuff that comes in with them, and then integrate them in as you go. Do you need to? I haven't found a need to do it yet, but I think that there's not anything like, oh, you're going to destroy things if you do it. So, all right. Wally, I can see a Midwest Mealworms TikTok video now. Time lapse of 2 plants growing side by side with one growing 2x as fast. End the video caption. Mealworm frass. Your plants will thank you. I have thought many times, Wally, of doing that. And then I never do. And what I finally accepted about myself is that I have zero desire to try to grow, document, or do that experiment. Now, that was several years ago when I, kind of gave up on that. Since then, I've got more time. Since I'm not in corporate America, I did my own garden last year. I might tinker around and play with that a little bit. But what I'm finding now that I really enjoy is getting frass to people that want to do those tests. So if you or if anyone else out there is wanting to do testing or play with frass, please let me know. I'll send you some. I've got a local person here who is growing mushrooms. That's their business, or one aspect of their small business is growing mushrooms, and they are currently experimenting with frass in their blocks, in their mushroom blocks. And I'm just giving frass because I could grow mushrooms, but I already get too involved in too many things anyway. So I would rather leave that to the folks that know what they're doing, because at the end of the day, it would be hard for me to say, I grew these 2 plants side by side, everything was the same as I could see, and this one is 2 inches taller. Well, maybe that one's just 2 inches taller because it's different genetics or different sunlight at a certain time. I don't feel like I could be the expert there to warrant pushing that out. All right, so we are down at Lucas. Any update on the black soldier fly, and are you going to do a flight net? Yes. All right, so there's more comments below here, but I'm on Lucas. Lucas Worms. Hey, Lucas. Any update on the black soldier fly larva, and are you going to do a flight net? I almost did it. Almost. I actually have the contraption set up on my table in the other room. And let's switch around here. So I actually have the black soldier fly larvae. These are all the very large ones, and you can see the dark ones. These guys are going to start turning. And so I could do it. Here's the mediums that just aren't there yet, size-wise. But I've got them here in the office with me because I keep this area cooler. So I keep this at 50 to 55 degrees, which is nice for these guys. Much colder than that. And what I'm told is that's not good. And so what I could do is grab these darker ones here and put them inside of a net and let them do their thing. I actually ran through that plan with Ben today. And I think since then I have talked myself out of it. But what I had told myself was, like whenever I looked into it, in order to do it optimally, you have to have lighting and this and that. And so that concerns me because in the past I would get caught up in that. You know, like I would jump way too fast. And so maybe instead of just not doing it, my plan was to take one of my screened mesh bottom sifting trays that I made that's got 1/8 inch mesh. I made 4 or 5 of those several years ago, so I have a couple extra. My thought was to take one of those, take a solid bottom container, take that other one, flip it over on top, and like zip tie it just to keep it closed. Throw the big guys in there with some, you know, like an apple cut in half or something to give the draw, and some cardboard pieces for them to lay their eggs in, and just see what happens. I talked myself out of that, but I did it because my thought is maybe it wouldn't work, and then I would have to buy things and yada. And there's no harm in doing it. So what I will probably do is what I just described and take some of those guys, put them, that way they're enclosed, right? Because they're going to start flying. And we already had a couple get loose in the farm. Luckily they're drawn to light, it seems. And so the exhaust fan, when it turns on, there's light out there and they get exhausted. So it's going well though. I was very impressed with the frass. I thought a lot of folks were telling me that the frass was going to be very like moist and gross, but it's not. I think if the way that I was feeding them, I was adding food in as we went. And so there's the potential that if you add too much moisture, potentially they can't consume it fast enough. Maybe it gets gross. And obviously it could get slimy if you put too much water or moisture into that. But I found that it was very, like it's not as dry as mealworm frass. It's more wet. It's got more moisture content to it. But it doesn't stink. It's not gross. So I'm very, happy with it from a, raising perspective. What I will probably do next, along with the test there, unless I change my mind again, what I will probably do next is start working on maybe a larger test, maybe 10 trays instead of just 2 trays. I did post to a couple places here local looking for food waste so that I could get like 150, 200 pounds of food waste and utilize that instead of scraps from my kitchen, because I don't think I could keep up with more trays just from my kitchen. So I'm going to talk with, see if I can reach out to some of the schools, some of the cafeterias, things like that, and find out what I can get. So it's going well. No issues so far. And I've made a couple sales. I'm actually kind of nervous. I shipped one on Monday to see how it went, see what they thought of them. I had 2 people buy locally just by putting posts on my page and a couple of Facebook groups. And one person was really excited. They got the larger ones, and what they want to do is they wanted them to start reproducing. So they were excited that it was like that. They said they looked a lot better than stuff they had seen in some of the stores. So I think that just goes that, if you can get it local, you're going to get better quality. So good question though. I will get some more videos of that posted, Lucas. I did one yesterday or day before. I think I did make it public on the YouTube channel. It was a longer one, where I did the sifting of the frass. So it's going well, and I'll have more updates soon. Marianne, in the pupa bin, do you add a paper towel with water for humidity and lay the pupa on a dry paper towel? I wouldn't recommend laying them on a paper towel. Because what that paper towel is going to do is pull moisture from them because it's drier than they are, right? But the first part where take a paper towel and very lightly mist it or get it very lightly wet. Wet isn't the right word. You don't want it like dripping. Like paper towel, run it under the water real quick and just make sure that it's absorbed moisture. And put that into your bin with your pupa next to them. Don't put it on top of them, put it next to them. And a lot of folks will use like those trays or drawers that slide in and out. If you then close that drawer, you've built a microclimate in there with that higher humidity for the pupa. But I would avoid putting them on top of the dry paper towel. That's not necessary. For a long time, I actually put them on wheat bran and started, I had die-off, and then I started, noticing it more, and brought it up on a live here and posted it in the group. And folks said that the bran is probably helping to demoisturize them, is what I remember from that. So we don't put any bran in there. We just put them right in the tray and a paper towel on top to collect them, which could be drying them out now that I think about it. I wonder if I should put a paper towel in there that's a little bit wetter. Makes you think. All right. Oh man, what time is it? 3:26. Okay, so we're getting towards the end of the time. I am right now at Bryce's comment about the zoonotic contamination with the superworms. So if there's more below that, give me a second. So let me just wrap up the normal closing things for folks that are going to need to stop at our stop time of 3:30 Central. So any questions in here that I missed or didn't get to, I will go back through after this post to our co-op page and get those answered or responded to. And then I'll get another one of these scheduled as well. Usually I try to do different day, different time just to mix it up so we can have more opportunity for folks to join. But thank you guys for coming. Lots of good questions today. And again, anything you might need, feel free to post it in the co-op group as well. And I think I covered everything there. Yeah, so let's keep going. If you need to drop off, that's perfectly fine. We'll probably go for another 5 or 10 minutes and try to get some more of this stuff answered here. Frass is a novel product that needs lots of studies done on it. Yep, it is a not well researched. I mean, there's stuff out there. It's just not what I struggle with from the frass perspective, Bryce, is how to operationalize it. And what I mean by that is when somebody comes to me and says, "I grow tomatoes. Why would I use frass?" I have no idea what to tell that person that grows tomatoes. But there was a study, and the reason I picked tomatoes is there was a study, Yord Producers, which was a mealworm farm out in Nebraska that was purchased by Yinsect. So they are no longer Yord Producers. They are Yinsect's current footprint in the U.S., although they're building more Yinsect buildings as far as I know. So they did a study with the University of Nebraska, and I think they used tomatoes. I know they did one on hops. I can't remember if they're the ones that did the ones on the tomatoes. But we need more specialized testing. That's what I think the biggest barrier is right now, is that if somebody says, "Hey, I'm going to grow cucumbers this summer, how would I use frass?" I have no idea what to tell them. And if you put too much frass on something or too little, it's not the right amount. Things are going to behave differently. And so, just expanding on the novel product comment there, I think you're absolutely right. We need more studies done on more particular nuanced uses or things that it could be used on. Michelle, do you spray the bran the beetles are in like you do the mealworms? Yes, because that's all together. So the spraying that I do, so for folks that haven't seen me do that, one of the things I do is I have an ATV tank sprayer. I bought it brand new that hadn't had any chemicals run in it, but you put it on an ATV and you drive around and you spray things right on a farm. So I took one of those. It's got a 3 horsepower pump. That sounds right. Sounds wrong to say that. It's a small pump, but basically what it is, you plug it in, it's got electric, you pull the thing and it sprays out water, right? And it's had a tank to it. I hooked it up to a 55-gallon drum, so I don't have to refill it as often. And I will go through and I will spray the trays of the younger mealworms. And so what I will do is we do beetle swap generally once a week. Usually it's on Thursday or Friday. Those trays then go into the cycle, right? The beetles go back into the new trays. Those trays go to sit and basically grow. I don't spray them until that tray is a week old. So by that time, there's potentially 1 to 2 week old mealworms. They've all hatched, and I'm spraying that tray. And I'll spray the top of it where the bran is. As that tray ages, once it gets to a point where those, usually at about 5 to 6 weeks, I will switch over to water gel crystals and not spray. What I ran into in the past was when I sprayed the older trays, I would notice that it kind of built bridges for them to be able to walk up and out. And what I think the problem was there, because other people have done this and commented they didn't have that issue. I think what I was doing is not cleaning my trays well enough. And so the dust over time, over multiple uses, just built up and they were able to get handholds and climb out. So I think with better diligence on cleaning trays, which we're doing now, that's probably going to mitigate that issue. And I might, at that point, I don't want to spray the mealworms directly. So the ideal scenario in my perspective is to have bran in there with them and then spray that bran. Because I don't want to spray directly on them and potentially cause any sort of suffocation issues or them going after each other, trying to eat that water off of each other. I haven't done that though, so I don't know if that would realistically happen, but usually there is bran in the trays when I spray. I don't spray the beetle trays because I'm putting water gel crystals in there the water gel crystals last longer than the sprayed water. The sprayed water evaporates faster. And I use the water gel crystals in the beetle trays to try to keep that moisture in there long enough for everybody in there to get something. It's not feasible to do that with the younger trays of mealworms because they'll dry out before they get eaten. And then they become a processing problem when you have to deal with sifting them and sorting them out. Good question though, Michelle. Hopefully that helped. Annette, how much substrate should be in an egg tray? I feel like I have too much. 3 inches or more. Should I separate or will I run into problems if it is too deep? 3 inches is very deep. Usually you only need a 3-inch tall tray for mealworms. And then I usually go to about 2 inches of depth at a max. Right now I would say we probably put in enough bran. The other thing is, the depth that we're going to, Annette, is probably different than what you might want to do. So what we're doing is we put in enough bran or wheat midds to get that tray to the point where we can harvest and sift it. We don't want the manual labor of having to add more bran when they're not old, when they haven't grown enough. And so our depth, I don't think we even get to 1 inch in depth. It might be 1 inch, maybe like 7/8, roughly something like that. And so we harvest those, remove them, put them back in, add a scoop in, and it's not 1 inch deep at that point. If you're doing it on a smaller scale, you can go deeper. So there's nothing wrong with going deeper until you get too deep. And so deep or depth will depend on what substrate you're using. So like oats. If you were using oats and you went to 2 inches deep, that bottom layer is going to get very, very compacted, right? Because oats will settle down, they're heavier, and that bottom layer is going to get real compacted. They're probably not going to go down there and mess around very much because there's not going to be a lot of oxygen down there. Your frass is going to filter down into that and basically cover it as well. So the oats you shouldn't go too deep in, probably just 1 inch. And you'll also start to realize that like when you add in your moisture sources, they're going to go down as the mealworms eat them. If they don't eat them fast enough, they'll go down into your oats and then you won't notice them and they'll mold. With bran, you could go a little deeper because it's a lighter substance, and the mealworms can go lower without all that weight on top of them. But what I would try to do is to stay away from anything above 2 inches. So start with 2 inches of your bran, let them eat it. And when you get to the point where you've got a lot of frass at the bottom, an inch probably, you might need to find that you need to sift earlier. But if you can let that bin go and don't have a need for it, then probably about an inch of frass is where I would say is the line, and go ahead and sift that out. Use that frass and then get it out of there, because frass is a more dense product, right? It's denser than bran and oats, and so they're not going to venture down into that on purpose. The other thing from a depth perspective you want to keep in mind is the deeper your substrate, the more opportunity it has to be a heat sink. And actually have a higher temperature than the ambient temperature, especially in trays with larger mealworms. So if you have larger mealworms and you put them in a tray with substrate that's very thick, the center of that substrate, both vertically and dimensionally in the tray, is going to get hotter. And so you need to be mindful of that to make sure that you're not creating a scenario where they're going to cook in the middle. Just from the friction that they generate, if you're in an 80-degree room and you've got 2-inch thick substrate and a whole lot of large mealworms, that tray is going to get hot. So simple thing to do, put your hand in there and see if it's hot. If it's hot to the touch, it's probably too deep or too many mealworms. The other thing you could do is get like one of the laser guns, laser temperature devices, brush away the top half and just measure the center of that, the core of it, to see what the temperature is. And if it's too hot, you'll see it. If it's above 80 degrees, that's going to be a problem. So hopefully that helped a net. There's probably nothing wrong with going, if there are scenarios where, like if you're going to go on vacation or need to go travel for work or something, and you want to make sure there's enough bran in there, temporarily it's probably not going to be, detrimental. You're not going to hurt a ton of stuff unless you get that large overheating scenario. All right, we are at 3:37. A couple more minutes. Wally, on the topic of introducing better genetics to your current long-term colony, you could also unknowingly bring in worse genetics to your colony. You just never know. I like a comment about quarantining, no outstanding point. Worse genetics, I haven't thought of that. Yeah, like I just took it from the perspective of different, but there's the potential that it could be worse. But then if there's worse, then there's better, right? So, lots to think about there. I do know, one of the things that comes to mind about that, Wally, is I do know that the major corporations do have like research and development folks that are doing genetic studies. They are trying to find the aspects of the insects that work the best for their specific use, right? So like Beta Hatch out on the West Coast, they are raising mealworms in mass in a very specific way using automation. And so if they can tailor their genetics and pick specific outputs from their farm to produce more offspring, then there's the potential that they could benefit from that. I just, from an aspect of where I'm at and the folks that I think are doing this, I don't see a huge gain from trying to do that. Julie, I'm doing that experiment right now. Yay! We love experiments. Post it. Post some pictures. Post some of what you're doing, and folks can give you some feedback and see what's going on there. Wait till they fly. Don't be scared. They are harmless. Well, it's not. So Lucas with the black soldier fly, it's not that I'm scared of him. It's like there's nothing in there that flies now. And so when something whizzes by the mask, it's like, right? It's just kind of scary at first. And then you're like, oh yeah, it's one of those. How many beetles do I need to produce 2,000 mealworms a week? Ooh, Mike, I have a calculator for that. I will whip that out tonight and get that answered once this thing posts. Usually it posts pretty quickly to Facebook, but I'll get that answer to you. And I need to get that calculator published. Wally, I wonder if for the pupa, a container with minimal ventilation and a bottle cap of water crystals to keep them hydrated. Would the water crystals release the moisture fast enough? Would be the question. I think the towel will release it, the paper towel will release it pretty quickly, but will the water gel crystals that are designed to just hold it, they do eventually dry out, right? So it does evaporate, but will it do it fast enough? You need a humidistat or a hygrometer and some time, you could test that for us. Bryce, frass is not much of a fertilizer. Use it as a soil enhancer. It does not burn plants like most manures. Yes, that's one of the awesome things about it. You can't burn your plants with it because generally speaking, the NPK or the nitrogen is very low. There are ways to change those outputs though. So there are products on the market that have a higher N or a higher K, and it's just a matter of what they're feeding those insects to get those final output numbers. But in general, you could throw a plant in it. The plant's not gonna thrive, but it's not gonna burn up from a normal type fertilizer scenario. So what's awesome about the frass is the chitin and the trigger that it tells the plant, hey, I'm under attack by insects. I need to put out my normal natural defenses to deal with those insects. That's what makes the plant stronger. It's not the frass NPK or the frass components that are like going into the plant making it better. It's the plant thinking, oh crap, I'm under attack. I need to bolster my immunity, become stronger, trigger my internal stuff to be a more healthy plant. Wally's going to test it. Awesome, thank you, sir. All right. I'm down to the bottom of all of the questions, comments, etc. So if I missed anything that you guys posted in here, I'll go back and take a look at that. And then I do have the one comment for Mike, I think. Yes, Mike. I'll get that answered and posted so that you can see what you need to produce 2,000 mealworms a week and get that answered for you. So thank you guys for joining. Thank you for all the really awesome questions. Got me thinking about a couple things here on my end, which always makes me happy. And we'll have another one of these scheduled, ideally for next week. I'll try to get that tackled and posted. If you'd like an email reminder, I do offer that as well. So if you want to get a 24-hour notice before the event via email that, hey, this is coming up, I BCC folks, so it's not sharing with everyone, and it is specifically just for that, so it's not used or shared in any other way. I kind of messed up this week. I sent an email yesterday with an old date. So thank you to the folks that caught that. It is a manual process that I do. I don't want to automate it and turn it into a whole big thing. So human error is a factor. But thank you guys for joining. Really appreciate it. If there's anything else that you need from the group or from me, please reach out. I'll be here and ready to tackle it. Have a great afternoon, evening, morning, everyone, and we'll talk again soon.